Oh, no, it's like a 13. Right.
All right, well, I think we can get started.
Right.
Good evening, everyone. This is the January 22nd, 2018 meeting of the Finance and Warrant Commission. If I could ask everyone to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Connor is here from Westwood Media Center, and thank you for being here. And we grant you permission to record the meeting. Is there anyone else who would like to record the meeting? I see no affirmative responses. With that, tonight is the preview of the article, which the warrant that has closed. This is our article sponsor meeting, and we very much appreciate everyone being here. And with that, we'll launch right in. We're very pleased to have Emily Parks, our Superintendent of Schools, and Heath Petraka, Director of Business and Finance at Westwood High School and the district. Thank you very much for being here with the preview of your article. Welcome.
Right. Thank you for having us. Does this pick me up, or do I need to?
If you could hold it, please.
Hold it. All right, got it.
Thank you.
So thank you for having us tonight. We appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, and thank you for putting us on first on the agenda. We appreciate that as well.
Don't make the other people back there jealous.
So I am here briefly to speak to you tonight about an article that we have asked for, and it would be a borrowing article to get an appropriation for the next, sort of the initial phase of our school building project. So let me tell you a little bit about where we are with that. So the school department has some capital needs. Specifically, 3 out of our 5 elementary schools are quite old and are nearing the end of their useful life in terms of the systems in the buildings. That's the Hanlon, the Deerfield, and the Sheehan. They were built between 1948 and 1953. So we've been looking at that situation for quite some time, and we engaged with the MSBA, which is the Massachusetts School Building Authority, which is a state-funded program, to go through what they call their SOI, their Statement of Interest process last spring. MSBA is a non-entitlement competitive grant program that provides partial reimbursement to local communities for building projects, school building projects, renovations, repairs, and or perhaps construction. So we went through that process in the spring, and we received really great news this past December that we've been invited into that MSBA process. It's just a tremendous opportunity, we believe, for Westwood. We have been invited into what they call the eligibility phase. So that's the first step in a fairly lengthy process. We were thrilled because we were invited in on our first try, and when we went to the MSBA board meeting, we were surrounded by communities who were saying things like, we've been applying for 7 years and we're so excited to get in. So we were very fortunate. Through the SOI process, you're only allowed to submit for 1 building at a time. We submitted for the Hanlon Elementary School, but we were clear in communicating with MSBA that a proposed solution probably will be broader than just Hanlon, that we'd really like to look at all of our needs. So now we've been invited into the eligibility phase. It's a 9-month process for us that would start on June 1. And there are several deliverables that we would need to commit to be part of this process with MSBA. And one of them, the most significant, is that by the end of that 9-month period, we would need to have secured funding for the next phase, which is called the feasibility study. And really what that is planning money. It's to enter into a year-long process, the end of which would be to have some kind of schematic design. So we have this article for Springtown meeting. We are currently working with the MSBA, looking at some figures to see what other communities have appropriated for this part of the process. We're working with an architectural firm that we've done some work with in the past to determine the specific amount of the warrant article. But order of magnitude, we're looking at probably $1 million to $1.5 million. So that is where we are.
Thank you for that. Questions from FinCom?
Yeah. When you say the Hanlon, is this just for the Hanlon School, or are we talking about the now-known Super Hanlon School?
So I think you're referring to something that came up a couple of years ago when we did a capital needs and space study, and there were a bunch of different options floated out there. So I need to be really clear that there have been absolutely no decisions made about the scope of this project and what ultimately the project would look like. And that's actually quite important because MSBA is very clear that you cannot get out ahead of them, that if they're going to invest money in a project like this, that we have to follow their process and they need a seat at the table in those decisions. So no Super Hanlon is slated at the moment, but
all options are open.
all options are open, and as I said, you're only allowed in their process to submit an application regarding one building. So we submitted Hanlon because we thought it would be putting either our best or our worst foot forward, depending on your perspective. We thought it would provide the best shot of actually getting invited into the process. But throughout that process, everything we've talked to them about and submitted, we've indicated that we want the conversation to be bigger than just Hanlon, that we have needs in other schools as well.
So do you think it's possible to amend it to reflect the other schools
Yes.
on an individual basis?
Yeah, I think that ultimately, and again, it's way early in this process, but ultimately, what they would want to talk to us about is what are our needs, both in terms of space, physical plant, education, and then they would want to look at all kinds of options and decide which one makes the most sense financially as well as educationally. So that could be any number of things, from renovating all of our buildings to, consolidation.
So the 1.1 to 1.5 million, is that to explore a single option or multiple options?
Multiple.
Yeah, all options.
All options with the Hanlon only? Sorry, I'm not sure what the output is of the,
No, so we're about to enter into the eligibility phase, which is a 9-month process. And during that process, we work with them to do something called the educational profile questionnaire, right, to look at all kinds of things in terms of enrollment projections and configurations and educational needs and all kinds of things. At the end of that phase, 9 months, then you go into something called the feasibility study, which is a whole year. And during that phase of the project, that's when you start to look at all the potential solutions. So it's going to be a fairly lengthy process. Peter?
Maybe getting ahead of myself, but if we were to go all the way and get funded, is there a target percentage that they fund of the cost? Is there a range that they fund? Any indication?
It's a good question. So we aren't sure. I will say that some of us who remember the high school building project remember getting something like 59% reimbursement, I think. Those days are over, it appears. So the reimbursement would not be that high, but and the rate of reimbursement depends on different things. But we think that if we could get somewhere in maybe the mid-30s, high 30s, that would be reasonable. Seem accurate?
Yes, and you also get percentages for, LEED certified buildings or energy efficient, facilities and that stuff. You get added percentages. So they have a whole formula that they work out for that.
Quick question. So regarding the percentage that MSBA kicks in, was that the program that Blue Hills Regional recently had approved?
Yes.
And because I thought that was funded. I thought it was around 52% or something around there.
That may be the case. I'm not sure what level that was funded at.
No, I'm not sure, but it may also be different because it's a vocational facility as opposed to a regular town facility.
Okay.
Mike?
I can add to that, it was different as well because it was a renovation project, so it was a lower cost versus a new project, a new building project. It's done, at least in that school, it was done on a per square foot basis. wanna say it was $350 a square foot, that was the reimbursement amount, and then whatever was, that was subtracted from the total amount to get to the 50%.
Okay, so it's not necessarily a percentage of the project, there's some other
At least
factors.
it was in that regional school. It could be different for a town school, so I'm not
Right.
saying the same formula applies in both instances.
Thanks, man.
Emily, how would you encapsulate why you think this is the right thing for Westwood now?
Why is it the right thing now? Well, I mean, two reasons. So as I said, I really do think we've reached the point with our buildings where doing nothing isn't an option for us at this point, that we know that we have needs that we will have to address, and they would be fairly expensive. And the question really is, do you want to continue to invest, say, $1 million to put a new roof on Hanlon if we think that the building is, has reached the end of its useful life? So the time is now in that sense. And, frankly, the idea that we potentially could get a significant amount of reimbursement from MSBA, I think is just an incredible opportunity for the community. As I said, there are many towns that, year after year after year attempt to get invited into this process. And, it's either good news or bad news that we got invited in the first time, that it appears that after a pretty thorough vetting from MSBA, they agreed with us that we have some significant needs here. And there were 82 communities that applied during this most recent round of SOIs, and 15 got invited in, and we were one of them. So I think that some outside eyes have assessed the situation similarly to how we've assessed our situation.
Yeah, Chris?
Is this funding source the equivalent of what we got for the high school years back?
Yes.
Current state?
Yeah, well, some of the particulars have changed with the program, but yeah, it's called their core program, yes.
Is this the only funding source for us to delve into?
Yeah, I think that this is the,
It's the only pool to jump into?
it is the only game in town, yes.
Okay.
And could you just speak to what the process would be in terms of input from residents
Yes.
going forward?
Sure. So the school committee, so first of all, let me say that we have been working in collaboration with Long Range Financial Planning, with the Budget Steering Committee, with the Municipal Building Task Force. So these have been ongoing conversations throughout the last several months. And we've been thrilled to have the support that we've had in that process. The school committee has published what we're calling our community engagement plan. And so we have identified a timeline and specific activities that are going to take place over the next several months to engage residents in this process. We're actually launching the process next week, where we have a letter that we are preparing to mail to all residents in Westwood that sort of sets forth what the need is, sort of presents that we have this potentially exciting opportunity, and lets them know that we really want to engage in a conversation with residents about how to move forward. So we've identified what we're calling our inform phase, and then starting in March, we have scheduled a series of community forums to ask residents, what is it we value in terms of our educational programs, what do we envision? Because really, if this project were to go forward, ultimately, we're talking about probably a 50-year investment for Westwood. So what we'd like to do is engage people in this conversation, and the school committee is hoping through that process to identify a set of criteria that ultimately could be used to evaluate whatever various options come out of this process. So yeah, I think I speak for the school committee in saying that it's critically important to us that we engage people in this process.
Great. Chris?
Just one other thought. You said it's a 9-month process beginning in June,
Yes,
right? Then it's a 12-month process.
right,
So we're at 21, starting 5 months from now.
right.
So it's 2 years. Can the
So
school handle 2 more years?
we
I mean,
can.
and how much are we going to have to throw into the school for the next 2 years?
Yeah,
too?
no, it's part of our responsibility to continue to maintain it. So, and we are.
Okay.
I should emphasize that our
It's
school buildings
Are
are
safe.
safe.
Yes.
We have safe buildings.
Absolutely.
And teaching
Yeah.
and learning is happening. So,
Even if it is in a closet.
Yes.
Yes.
other questions for Emily and Heath? I don't see any. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
We'll look
Thanks very
forward
much.
to seeing you on February 6th as well.
Yes.
Thank you
Great.
very much.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so now we are moving to the Board of Selectmen. Chairman Hickey, Mike Gillette, Town Administrator, Ms. Hyde.
Second one in town. All the schools we have, one, two.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, Chairman Hickey, welcome. Pam Dukeman, Finance Director, welcome, everyone.
So we are still in the phase of finalizing most of the budget pieces, correct? Yeah. Is there any specifics you want to talk to about?
No, I think that, all the finance commission members that are here are familiar with the process.
Oh,
So-
Mike, the microphone, please, sorry.
Familiar with the process, so we, have laid out all the financial articles on the first 2 pages, from the budget to the allocation for capital to the reserve funds. You're all familiar with, so it followed much the same procedures where we usually follow.
So we'll be coming into your meeting on February 6th and doing an overview presentation of the budget. The selectmen will just finalize some items at their next meeting, but they're moving along in the budget process. Relatively speaking, we're looking at a quiet budget year. As you know, we've all been very active as a town over the last couple of years, and you'll see that this budget is, a little bit more of a quiet year than it's been the last couple of years. So, we're continuing with good operating budgets, but we're looking at moderate growth of about 3%. Our school municipal budgets are about at those targets right now. We'll continue healthy capital appropriations, continue our appropriation to OPEB and the reserve accounts. But other than that, trying to have a quiet year. And the selectmen were trying to really make sure that that school article became kind of the focus point for the community to really have some time to look at that and to know that everyone is in support of that going forward so that we can start that process with the schools. So I think you'll like that with the budget, that it's a bit quieter year. Certainly been so many good things going on over the last couple of years, and this year is more of a settle-in kind of year. Take a little bit of a breather as we then embark on our new things going forward in future years.
Can I
Yeah,
ask a general
George.
question? I had raised this, an issue in the past about what I call sustainability of municipal budgets. And then I was very, very concerned about the proposals on the table for tax reform. And now that I think we're one of the 5 states that's going to be hit the heaviest because we have very high services. We also have very high property and relative state taxes. And one of the concerns I have here is, has the whole dynamic shifted in terms of how towns are going to be able to fund their budgets based on property taxes? I mean, I truly think that in the long term, we have a problem here. That I just don't see how towns like Westwood, which deliver very high services, we all like living here, but all of a sudden, people have lost a critical deduction. Because I would assume that there are a heck of a lot of people in Westwood whose property taxes alone are well north of $10,000. And my sense is the model cannot perpetuate itself. At some point in time, I just don't think the existing model of how we fund ourselves, given what this Congress did to us, is sustainable.
Yeah, I mean,
It's live. So, George, we agree with you. I think everybody in the room agrees with you, and it's a well-taken point. So what do we do? So we, as PM said, even before tax reform started, we initiated discussions with the schools in September. We've been meeting monthly to try to keep those budgets as healthy but as sustainable as possible. That's where we all are. To tell the department heads in the town that we need to think 4 and 5 years down the road. We had been in that space, and then tax reform came. And the line was out the door at Town Hall in the days leading up to New Year, people looking to give us money, right? So for many people, it was their first time in Town Hall. And it was really the first time for many people that they thought about property taxes. So that's a growing issue, and we are going to start feeling more and more pressure. I think, too, there needs to be a little bit of a mindset shift when we look at some of what's contained at town meeting in terms of policy. There's a growing mindset of being uber anti-development, right? And I know that might sound redundant, but when you talk to people about not wanting to be inhospitable to business and not being inhospitable to developers, there's a sense that we should be. And so that's okay. We can keep that trend up and we can keep that mindset going. But when we continue to squeeze all of our revenue into the residential taxes, it's going to come to a head. So I think that it's critically important that we are as conservative as we can be on all of our operating budgets, but we also are open-minded about how, as a town, we can generate revenue. So I think it's twofold. So I hope that
It does a little bit, John, but I guess I'm trying to get people to step back and realize this is probably long-term going to be more difficult than Proposition 2.5. When you truly look at the impact on individuals to sustain the model we have, it's going to run out of steam at a certain point in time. And all of a sudden, until this tax bill, 3% fine, we can live within it. I honestly think, I really think, and it may be a solution that's going to have to come from the state in terms of maybe how it restructures, like New York is trying to do right now, or California, where they're trying to adjust for the impact on lack of deductibility for property and state taxes. But there has to be a solution, because otherwise I really think the economic model is not going to be sustainable. People, the loss of that tax deduction is really, really significant, and it's going to affect a lot of people. So I think you're going to see pressure, frankly, from a segment of Westwood residents who normally wouldn't put pressure on, but they're going to say, I can't bear any more increases in these taxes.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement.
Yeah, I don't know the answer, but I'm very, very concerned that it's.
When you get it, let me know.
Yeah.
We've been talking. This is the
Well,
same conversation we've all been having.
I raised this issue a year and a half ago, and I said, you better watch what this potential Republican tax bill is going to do. I actually was astounded what they did to SALT. I never thought it would be as severe as it turned out to be. But that $10,000 limit is absolutely very, very difficult, I would say, for a lot of taxpayers in Westwood to absorb.
And that's a concern even with a split tax rate.
So, yeah, I don't think that's all. I agree with you.
I think it all depends on whether or not there's a significant tax savings on the other hand. The connection to the deduction of property tax and income tax is serious.
Mike?
But if people realize lower taxes in general, at least for the first few years, it won't be so bad. In the future, it will become bad because people will forget the connection.
Mike, I'll be honest with you, I do a lot of fairly sophisticated financial reading. It's already there. I mean, the impact is going to hit New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and California, and one other state very, very fast. There isn't a lot of time here. The lower rates are what they've taken away, it's not offset by lower rates. Anyway, it's a real concern I have long-term in terms of how maybe long-range financial planning needs to take a look at that, too.
Do we know what percent of taxpayers are above the 10,000 threshold here in town?
Well, 50% of taxpayers in town are above 10,000 on their, just the real estate tax. The limit is 10,000 on your real estate tax and your state income tax. So it's a stunning, targeted tax bill that absolutely is going to affect communities like Westwood.
So with respect to the financial articles, I assume we'll see final language by the time of our hearing on March 5th.
We're voting on the 30th on the budgets.
Okay, great. Good, so I guess that brings us to your other articles, maybe starting with street acceptances, road improvement. I'm looking at page 2 of 5.
So again, standard articles, the street acceptances, we have none before us. It does not mean we won't receive requests from developers, but we have nothing in mind at the moment or have not received word of anybody proposing anything at this time. The standard article for road improvements, where we receive Chapter 90 monies and other funds like the sidewalk fund for complete streets. Those are monies that would be expended through that road improvement article. The next article, new fund for cable. We're still in discussion. The state, like last year, fall meeting required that we change the way we account for hotel and meals taxes, and for, what was the other one for the school? School special ed. They also have revised the way we account for cable funds. Pam and I and the director of Westwood Media Center are having discussions about how we're going to do this. There are a couple of different options. Neither one of them match the way we do it. We particularly like the way we do it now, but we're forced to modify that. So we're still in discussion, and that may or may not require a town meeting article. So this may go away prior to town meeting. The next article is cleaning up on the police station borrowing. Want to speak to that, Pam?
That won't go forward at this town meeting, but it will at a future one. Just to clean up and have a debt, rescind some debt, but we'll wait on that till a future town meeting.
Just a question on the police station. Are we withholding funds because they can't demolish the building right now?
It's not today.
Oh, it is? Okay. They're actually got that wiring thing straightened out?
It's half done.
Half done. Okay, I'm just curious. Okay.
That brings us to the Islington articles.
Right. So there are a number of, a few articles. Well, the first article is for the disposition of any municipal properties with respect to the Islington Center redevelopment. This could be multiple articles if it needed to be, so it's flexible. We're not sure exactly how this will go forward, but it's being reserved so we can do whatever needs to be done to forward that project with town lands in the mix.
Okay. Now I understand there's no proposal that's been agreed upon at this point.
there's discussions ongoing.
There's a plan that's just been submitted to the planning board, and that process will be going on. There's also a discussion going on with the developer from the Board of Selectmen's office about the disposition of land and other arrangements that need to be made to coordinate that project.
And again, if this is going to go forward, you'll have something for us by March 5th. Okay.
Well, I'm not sure by March 5th, but before, you have 2 public hearings, and
Right.
it may require us to wait till to finalize the second public hearing that you have at the end of the month. I think
yeah.
we'll be pushing it to get it done by March 5th.
Right, and, you know, I realize everyone is working hard, and there are a lot of moving parts and a lot of people really working hard on that. But as you know, it's hard for us to make a decision on something, you know, for just hearing it. So, you know, this body reserves the right to vote indefinite postponement if we just feel we don't have enough information or enough time to consider something. And we're all aware of that, and, you know, we all do the best we can. But I just want to raise that.
It's preferable to get it here for March 5th.
Yes, yes. Okay. So there's another article relative to Islington as well?
Yes, again, this relates to the relocation, renovation, possible expansion of Wentworth Hall, which is one of the buildings that's going to be preserved and relocated across the street, at least under the current proposal in front of the planning board, and that's been submitted to the Board of Selectmen.
Okay. Any questions from FinCom? No? I think that brings us to Obed Baker.
Over Baker House, I think this is the third shot on town meeting floor. And at the moment, it's not looking good. We had an RFP in anticipation of having this article presented at this year's town meeting. We had the opening with no proposals made, and so we're kind of at a standstill position, and it's probably not going to go forward at this year's town meeting. So we're looking for any suggestions that people might have on what we might be able to reuse this.
Well, if Hamlin needs some extra space, they can always move in there.
These small classrooms.
How much insurance do we have on it?
I choose not to answer that question.
Okay, moving right along.
Hedgerow Lane. This is a right-of-way. It formerly was a cul-de-sac that has been relocated and calls for the abandonment of a portion of the public way, including most of the cul-de-sac. It fronts on 3 property owners' property, and the property owners and the developer are continuing to have discussions about how best to allocate the land to them or not in order to preserve their frontage requirements and in order to meet the building requirements or the zoning requirements. The hope is that they'll come to some understanding before town meeting, and we can come to town meeting, but that remains to be seen. This was on the fall town meeting schedule as well, and they weren't able to come to that agreement by then, and they still haven't.
Questions from FinCom? No questions on that. Looks like that brings us to hydrants.
Yeah, the new fire chief has, it went through one snowstorm, and wants to explore the possibility of introducing a bylaw that would require fire hydrants to be cleared by residents in the area of those hydrants within 12 hours of the storm is the time frame that he was looking to see that it would be done. And this is because he doesn't believe that we have sufficient manpower to be able to maintain those to be cleared, especially in winters that, like we had, 95, when we had, storm after storm. And it's important that they be able to respond to the fire and keep it clear. We also had that serious fire just recently, and that brought it all to everybody's mind. So he's still exploring how he would word it. He's looking at other communities to see what they have in front of them.
Is there a model in other communities for this?
Yes, I'm sure. There are other communities that have models for this, yes.
And is there a penalty?
Well, that's part of it, and that would certainly be the debate, whether or not you do penalize or just make it a requirement without a penalty.
George?
I think especially in neighborhoods, on the one hand, our DPW does a phenomenal job of plowing the roads. On the other hand, they plow in the fire hydrants. And one of the thoughts I have here, could we have something maybe where the DPW, I'd rather see the DPW get some overtime to go out and clear the hydrants, because where the plows to plow that stuff in, I think you're sort of penalizing the particular person whose property happens to have the fire hydrant. And after a couple of these storms, you can't even find them, even with those posts sticking up. So I would hope the chief maybe would look at some provision where the DPW helps the fire department. I would rather see us pay a little overtime for the DPW, who has much better equipment than the average homeowner to go out and dig those things out, Mike. Because when they're in a snowbank, that's not for shovels. That's heavy-duty stuff.
Could be a health issue for some folks. Other Other questions or comments?
It's kind of onerous for the one
The one
person
get-
that
no,
has
the
it
one
in front of
person,
it, when their neighbors don't. I mean, you know, you'd like to think everybody'd help out, but it's kind of an onerous requirement for that one.
So I just put it this way, the fire chief is new, just came on board, saw an event, made a recommendation, put a placeholder on it, and he's listening. So I think these comments are all very good. Certainly we'll bring them back to him, give him some consideration, and then come to the Board of Selectmen with what he proposes, if anything. He may decide that it's not the right time, or he hasn't had enough time to truly study the issue and know whether it works for Westwood, and needs to mature a little bit more, so.
Mike, what is the process right now? Does the fire department have to do it? Or who actually goes out and clears
The
it?
fire department does do it. I think as well, the Dedham Westwood Water District does a little bit as well, and then we count on residents. Some residents do it, and I think if you recall in '95, there was actually a plea to people, could you please, if you have a fire hydrant in your neighborhood, please get out and clear it out, because we just can't get to them all.
Okay.
And it's in everybody's interest. If people are in good health, and you got a fire hydrant next to your home, and you want your home to be there, if that fire were to be, it's a good idea to clear it out and not leave it to chance that the fire department will respond and have to do it themselves. That's what the chief's concerned about, that they arrive at a fire and they should be hooking up the hose and getting it to fight the fire, and the first step is that they gotta dig out the fire hydrant to get it done. That's what he's concerned about.
And I think your point is well taken, that if, the chief were to ask folks in town to do it, as a public service announcement, to say, hey, you know what, it's hard for us to do this, we're asking for your help. I think people in neighborhoods who are, able-bodied and, have the equipment would be glad to do it, thinking, oh, they want us to do this. Okay, I bet people would do it, just with him asking. Although it could be difficult for some folks who actually have it, abutting their property to do it based on their circumstances. So maybe that's an idea, just to get the word out in town that we need your help going forward.
It might be just that, to get the word out. And for those folks that can't get to it, please give us a call, and those are the hydrants we'll schedule for town staff to do. So,
Right. Or
some options.
if your neighbor, is, not well, do it for them. Figure out where they are in your neighborhood. I bet people would be glad to do it.
Community service for the kids in town.
There you go.
Well, I would add they did that this year. I think if you follow us on Twitter, a lot of the high school groups have been doing that this winter. The sports teams are going out. They have some great fun pictures of them kind of shoveling out hydrants and then posting them, and it's great public community service hours for them. So they have really been doing that.
That's
They have
great.
much more fun with it than we do.
Okay, so does that, I think that does it for you folks. Any other questions before we let them go?
I'm curious as to what percentage or how much money you brought in before year end on prepayment on taxes.
Sure, and we had given an update to the selectmen at their last meeting. It was really a confusing time, as George indicated earlier, a major change, but kind of, really kind of sudden and unexpected for people, and right around the holidays. So it was really that 2-week period right before the end of December. We had over 800 residents come in and prepay their tax bills out of about 5,000 parcels in town. So it was significant. So some people, kind of mailed in a payment or paid online, but we had a lot of people coming into town hall, and there were days that we kind of had people lined up, and there was just a lot of confusion. People were, what was the new tax change and what would it mean for them? There was a lot of conversation at the counter, people coming in expecting to kind of pay a certain amount and hearing what the resident next to them was going to do, and they were changing their mind on the spot about what to do. So it was hard. But people just really were paying attention, that this is going to be a change. It doesn't happen until the 2018 federal tax filing, so that won't be for a year. But they had an opportunity to prepay before December 31 and have that be allowed, as if they itemize now, they can deduct that in their 2017 taxes when they file in the spring. So, kind of a lot of interest. Clearly, a lot of people who hadn't been in town hall before, and I will just say this: I thought our staff did an excellent job. Our collector staff and our treasurer staff. It was really an all hands on deck kind of issue for town hall. We tried to be as efficient and helpful to people as we could be, and tried to make them feel good about coming into Westwood Town Hall if they hadn't been before. But it really will be. There was a rush, and people prepaid what they could, but I think over the next year we'll see kind of what that does mean on a broader basis for Massachusetts communities as this goes forward. And we wanted to stress, the town didn't take in more revenue, we just are taking it in earlier. So some people were saying, oh, this is a real, bonus for the town. We're not making extra money. We're taking it in sooner. By the way our accounting works, at year end, we'll have to kind of pull out that revenue to prepayment, so it's not going to flow into free cash. We're not going to have some huge free cash number. But yes, the payments have been made sooner. So it's an interesting time.
Did you show them the basement?
Hmm?
You show them the basement and get them to get the
Full tour.
yeah. Get support for renovations.
Any other questions for the selectmen? No? Thank you very much. We'll see you in February. Thank you. And with that, we have the planning board. Abby McCabe, town planner.
It's over here.
Keep it going.
Well,
Please, come out.
we got this far.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. For the record, I'm Abby McCabe, town planner, and with me here tonight is Steve Olenoff, member of the planning board. We submitted, on behalf of the planning board, 4 zoning amendment articles. Some of them may come off, but the first 2 are related to the Islington Center redevelopment. As Mike mentioned, the planning board recently received a special permit application for the redevelopment of the town-owned and private properties in Islington. The planning board opened their public hearing last week, and that hearing was continued to their February 13th meeting. So with the way the application was submitted, there's at least 2 zoning amendments that would need to go forward if the project is approved. And the first one would be a zoning map amendment to extend the flexible multiple use overlay district to the School Street, the 9 School Street and 277A Washington Street properties. Currently, that's the property where the historic Blue Heart Tavern is temporarily located, where the former tailor shop building, that's zoned residential. And then in the back behind there, there's a house at the 277A Washington Street. And with the plan submitted, it shows the CVS, the historic Blue Heart Tavern, and some parking within that residential zone. So that would need a zoning amendment to expand that overlay district. So the planning board will still be reviewing this project at their upcoming meetings. The planning board is planning to hold a public hearing at their meeting on Tuesday, February 27th, to review all zoning articles. So all the articles they've submitted, as well as the petition zoning amendment article that was received. So then the planning board can report back to you for your March public hearings. And the second...
Can I just ask you a question on that? So the tailor shop, that's actually residential?
Yes.
And what's the history on that? How was the commercial
I think
property?
the way it was originally zoned, it was the business zone is just set back straight along the street and didn't go the full depth of the property. So I think maybe where the Cafe Diva building is, that's in the business zone, the local business as well as the overlay, but it was not expanded all the way back to the property.
Anybody have questions on the first piece of that? For Abby? No? Okay.
And then the second placeholder related to Islington Center redevelopment is the planning board would consider an amendment to the retail sales and services. Currently, there's a limit on 10,000 square foot maximum. And the way the application is submitted, the CVS store and the pharmacy are considered one retail establishment, and it was submitted over the 10,000 square foot. So the planning board will review at upcoming meetings their support for that space in the retail services amendment.
How much is the proposal?
I think it was 13,000 square foot something, almost 14,000 square feet.
And where is that located on that?
In the plan as submitted, it was shown on the corner of the School Street and Washington Street. So where the Cafe Diva and that old tailor shop building is today.
There was no proposal for a drive-through?
The drive-through has been withdrawn, so that's not in the application before the planning board right now.
Other questions? Yeah, Peter.
Right now, it kind of just says, maybe I'm not reading it right, but it just says, okay, we're gonna approve for over 10,000. There's no cap on that. It sounds like it's unlimited. I know there's other approvals that have to take place, but it seems like we'd want to cap this at some level.
Right. I think we'd like to look at the exact language. The planning board would likely prepare some very specific language, probably related to a pharmacy as well, or because one way to look at it is CVS has the pharmacy portion as well as the retail. So I think the planning board would try to put forward very specific language.
And just wondering for perspective, do we have a sense of how big the existing CVS is there? Is anybody know that? Like, are we going from, are we doubling the size? Are we?
Is it comparable to the one in Dedham on Route 1?
I think the current CVS is about 8,500 square feet on the first floor with storage in the basement. It's probably just over 10,000 square feet total. This is all on one floor, and it's a little bit larger. Do we know how big the one in Dedham is? I don't. I think it's probably close to the size that's being proposed here.
But that has the drive-through option, the one in Dedham.
Other questions for Abby on this one? Don't see any.
Okay. The next article has to do with the OPED Baker House. This also was submitted as a placeholder. This may be removed, as Mike mentioned. We had put this on as a placeholder in case we received responses to the recent RFP, but the planning board in upcoming meeting will review if it's worth looking into. The Obed Baker House is in the local business zone. However, there's a vacant parcel next to it that we thought could take a look at. That's currently zoned residential, so it's possible that at some point the planning board might want to consider expanding the business zone to that residential property.
See no questions. It's hard to question a placeholder to some extent.
And again, this last one is also a placeholder. This one is, the planning board is currently reviewing an application, a special permit application for phase 2 at University Station. They're reviewing the residential proposal. So we put in a placeholder as we're looking at that. The planning board just opened the public hearing and just taking a careful look at the zoning to see if there's any other amendments we might be needed while we're reviewing this application. And we don't know of any right now, but we had put this on just in case.
Nora, would you mind maybe speaking from the economic development side, if you don't mind, Abby, just in terms of phase 2 and sort of where you see things going?
Sure. So
Oh, thank you, Abby.
Thank you. The planning board approved a modification to the overall master development plan last spring, and that called for the area on the east side near the train tracks to have first a 100-unit condo building, which is before the board right now, and then to have two other commercial buildings, one a straight office building and the other a mixed-use building that would have retail on the first floor and commercial on the second. Neither of those commercial buildings have proposals before the board at this point. NED is still marketing the ideas. They are talking to a couple of different businesses. They have some leads, but they don't have any signed leases at this point, and they're not going to build spec buildings. So the first portion of the second phase of development, other than the hotel, which has already been open, the next part of it will be this condo, 100 units of condos, and that will be followed by office and mixed use, but we really just don't know when. Then the third phase of development would be the area on the top of the hill behind Gables as you go up Station Drive, past 101 Station Drive. There's land as you're coming up that hill, and 101 Station Drive is on your right. NED owns land on the left side of the street, and that is slated for all office development. But again, they're talking to some businesses that may be interested in going there, but there's nothing that's close to the approval stage right now.
Thank you. Jim?
Of the 100 condo units, how large are they going to be? 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom?
1 and 2 bedroom.
Earlier, we had talked about an impact study on the schools. Is anything going forward in that respect?
Yes, the planning board application submission did require an fiscal impact study by the applicant that was submitted, and the planning board has hired a peer reviewer to review that fiscal report. So the public hearing was opened on January 9th, and they're meeting next week on January 30th. So they're still reviewing the engineering and the fiscal. They'll be continuing the hearing at their meeting next week to review that a little bit more.
Building, how tall is it going to be spread out? I mean, what kind of building are we looking at?
There's 2 4-story buildings, or first level is ground level parking garage, and then 4 levels of residential, 2 buildings with 50 units in each.
Other questions for Abby or Nora on this?
Can I ask a question when you're done with this on the pharmacy article?
Sure.
Yeah. On the CVS Article 2, what size is Walgreens here on 109? And does that change, would allowing this change their ability to grow to a bigger facility?
If I can answer that.
Yeah, thanks,
The
Ron.
planning board hasn't developed language for the bylaw article yet.
Okay.
The proposal at this point is that there would be an allowance for someone to apply for a special permit in order to be larger than 10,000 square feet. In the regular section of the bylaw, that's what we do. So in underlying zoning, for instance, in the local business A district, you're allowed by right to have a building up to 10,000 square feet. You're allowed to apply for a special permit for a building larger than 10,000 square feet. That's just in the underlying zoning. However, when we wrote the FMUOD, the Flexible Multiple Use Overlay District, we didn't allow for that additional size to be considered as part of the special permit. We capped it at 10,000 square feet. So what the planning board will be looking at is if you're developing within an FMUOD, should you have the same ability to have the building be larger than 10,000 square feet considered as part of the special permit. So if you weren't in FMUOD, you're just in the underlying zone, you have the right to ask for a special permit for a larger building. Under the bylaw, the way it's written, you don't have that ability under FMUOD. So they'll take a look at whether it makes sense to open that ability to apply for a special permit to all businesses within the FMUOD, to just pharmacies, whether it will be limited in certain instances. That's what the planning board will consider at their public hearing. So we're not yet at that stage. Their hearing will be in February, and then we'll have the language at that point.
And what's the size of that Walgreens, just out of curiosity?
You know, I don't know offhand, and I don't want to venture a guess.
No. Any other questions for Abby, Planning Board, Nora? I don't see any. Thank you very much. Yeah, so the last article we have to discuss tonight is a petitioner article. Ms. Milosevic Fabrizio, I don't see her here. Is there anyone here to speak for her? I know she had asked to be put on last, so maybe what we can do is take up some other business and see if she, because we've been moving pretty quickly through this. What I'd like to do is to assign the write-ups at this point. Getting a little eager now. We used to do this later, but there's no time like the present. By my math, there are 27 articles, and I think I've taken, roughly 10 of them for Jane and I to do. George is going to do the Islington articles to the extent they'll be on the warrant. So there's about 15 or so to go around in terms of your volunteering. And I was hopeful that those of you on the well, first of all, hopeful for a couple things. Number one, that the subcommittee chairs, particularly, Julie, Barb, Rob, they've got a lot to do in terms of their write-ups. So hopefully the rest of us can pick up the slack. And if folks could perhaps take a volunteer for some of the articles that are within your subcommittee, for example, the fire article, some of the school articles, but not, not Barb and Julie. So let me go through these, and we'll just ask for volunteers. So I'm going to start with the, let's see, okay, you know what, I'll do it that way with the list.
I'll make
We've
it
got a
easy.
few
I'll
lists.
take,
So-
I'll take, there's 4 articles for Islington on planning board, and on the Selectmen side, I'll take all those.
Thank you, George. Let me just go through, we have so many different, okay. Bear with me, folks. All right, so I'm gonna go off this, all right, the colored one, the one with the green. Okay, so the school committee article, that's the first one here, the MSBA. Any volunteer on that one?
I'll take it.
Who said that? Tom? Thank you, Tom. Okay, school committee. All right, the selectmen articles, supplemental appropriations, Jane and I will do that. And the second one, unpaid bills, the operating budget. I think we'll take municipal capital, school capital, sewer capital. So Jane and I will do all of those.
We're taking appendix.
Yes. We'll also do, well, actually, maybe somebody else should do other capital improvements to flesh that out. Any volunteers on that? Yeah, Peter, thank you. We'll do, Jane and I will do the stabilization fund. OPEB, Rob, thank you. Capital stabilization fund, I'll do that one. Street acceptances, if there is one.
That's pretty much the same thing I did.
Anyone?
I'll do that
Mike?
one.
Mike got his hand up first, Rob, sorry.
You win.
Road improvement, I'll take that one. The cable PEG money, any volunteer on that one? Yeah, Howard, thank you. Okay, we're flying through this. Okay, so Islington, that's gonna be George.
We're going to do them since we'll do them together.
Fabulous, George and Chris, for those, well, they're
And we'll do the planning board and the selectmen ones.
fabulous, thank you. That brings us to Obed Baker. Any volunteer on that?
I'll do that one.
That was Jim, thank you. Hedgerow Lane, to the extent that might be necessary, anyone? Anyone, Peter? Oh, okay, all right. The fire hydrants, Cindy?
You gonna shovel them out? It's nice and quick.
Okay.
Yeah, I gotta be quick.
All right, so planning board, Islington, that's George and Chris. Obed Baker, would you mind doing that, the planning board, Obed Baker too, Cindy? That goes, I think it goes kind of hand in hand.
Oh, wait, no,
No, I wanted to, yeah.
Jim,
don't-
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Pardon me. Okay, and then we've got the University Ave, UAMUD. Any volunteers on that one? Okay, oh, we'll give that to Wes. Wes is doing
Okay.
planning board. Wes couldn't be here.
For
And the petitioner article,
There you go.
Mike O'Hara could not be here, he's traveling. We'll assign that to Mike. And I think that's everything.
Did you get the police station article, borrowing article?
Well, no, that was withdrawn.
She hasn't been.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we've done that. Let's see, and just in terms of other business, I just wanted to let you folks know, I'm going to be traveling on business for our next meeting, but Mike O'Hara is going to be chairing the meeting. Unfortunately, with the time zone difference in meetings, I'm not going to be able to call in, but I promise to watch on Westwood Media Center and get caught up, of course, before our next meeting. So Mike will be chairing that.
Good?
Yes, it's a 5-hour time zone, so we're not going to say this publicly. This is for work. So with that, any other business, folks? Public?
Obviously, we're not meeting tomorrow night.
Yeah, we're not meeting tomorrow night. I'll take comments from public and press, still waiting to see if the petitioner arrives.
Did the petitioner talk to you?
Yes,
She talked to Jane.
yes.
Okay,
She was unsure if she'd be able to make it in time. so
okay.
I have-
Well, I'd sort of like it noted for the record that the petitioner wasn't here at our public hearing.
Any comments from the public? Seeing none, any other business you folks would like to discuss?
Can I throw one out? I think it's more the town clerk who's not here, but we attempted to do electronic voting last meeting, and that failed. Does anyone know where that stands, if it's still alive?
Decide.
There was a trial run at the meeting on Bayfree, and a test of the system that went very well. So Dottie, the town clerk, is evaluating, possibly bringing it forward to, again, to the Springtown meeting. She'll have to speak to that, whether or not she's going to, but it's under consideration.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
All right, well, unfortunately, we've gotten through our agenda. We'll need to wait to hear from the petitioner at our public hearing. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make it.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, everyone.
Good job.